if you're a wife that's just looking to improve the quality of, your marriage, discovering weed, that's where you should be. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. As you can see, we are right now inside of my closet, and I'm going to let you know that the reason why I'm filming this video in my closet is because, well, if you follow me on Instagram, you already know, but my closet is actually one of the only spaces in my entire home where I have some privacy, where nobody can bother me, and it is kind of like my own little private sanctuary in here. My husband and I, we live with our in-laws. All of our in-laws live with us, and so with 7 people in our home, and we live in a mobile home as well. With 7 people in our home, space can be very, very tight. And whenever I film, as you may have already noticed, a lot of my filming ends up happening like in my bedroom or in the bathroom or outside of the home. Sometimes in the kitchen and the living room, but that's basically it. I don't do a lot of filming in our kitchen and in our living room because there's usually somebody in those rooms. And also, we have like a few open spaces in our home where my brother-in-laws are usually, at, and so I don't want to be filming while they're in the room. It's just kind of awkward. So this is right here. This is the only place where I can really just be by myself, not have anybody walking in or out, not having anybody looking at me really weird, wondering what I'm doing. So I hope that you guys don't mind that I am shooting inside my closet. If you don't follow me on Instagram, you should, because I do have sometimes what I call closet confessions in the closet, or closet diaries. I'm still trying to figure out what I want to call it, but basically it's when I do my Instagram stories inside my closet, because again, it's the only place that I have privacy. I do post on my Instagram stories daily, and I also post daily as well, wanting to provide just as much information as I can to you guys about marriage, especially if you're newlywed, if you're a millennial couple, if you're a wife that's just looking to improve the quality of, your marriage, discovering weed, that's where you should be. So today's video, I wanted to answer your guys' questions. So I posted up on Instagram for a few days, in a few weeks, for you to just let me know what some of your questions are. They don't have to be about marriage. If they are about marriage, great. If they are just about life in general, that's great too. I am just excited and happy to answer any questions that you guys have for me. Anyway, so let's just go ahead and get started with the first question. What do you do when you start a godly marriage and all of a sudden it stops? Specifically, husband isn't into it anymore, past church hurt maybe, doesn't want to go to church anymore. Alright, so my first question is, why is that a problem? Now, don't assume that I don't care about going to church and everything, but I just want to ask you, like, why do you think that that's a problem? Is it because you think he should be going to church? Is it because him not going to church is affecting your marriage? Because it may or it may not be. Him going to church doesn't necessarily mean that your marriage is going to get any better. And most of the time that when we get upset at our spouse for doing something or for not doing something, it's because we think that we have a manual of how they should be acting, when in reality, we don't. We can't control what anybody else does or what they don't do. I would say that the best thing that you can do in this situation is to just continue showing up for your spouse, your husband, and continue to love him. And for you, like, if you continue going to church, like, don't stop going to church just because your husband doesn't go to church. Him not wanting to go to church, it has nothing to do with you. You're only thinking that it has something to do with you, but it has nothing to do with you. It has everything to do with him. So let me give you another a scenario, a perspective to think about. So let's say that your husband was off, in another country serving in the military, and he finally came home, and he is suffering from PTSD or just some from other stresses and trauma or traumatic experiences that have happened to him. If he all of a sudden decides when he comes home that he doesn't want to go to church, are you going to be mad at him? Probably not, because you're just so happy that he's home safe from being overseas and fighting in the war, right? And so just like thinking about like your husband not going to church is just a circumstance, and circumstances change. They are completely neutral, and it doesn't mean that anything has gone wrong. You only think that it has because in your mind you feel like he should be going to church, and because he's not going to church, it's making you feel frustrated or angry or upset, which is then causing you to feel some sort of resentment towards him, and then causes you also to treat him in a certain way where, I don't know, it may not be respectful. You can be really mean to him. So I just want you to be aware of those thoughts, and just know that him not going to church has nothing to do with you or nothing to do with your marriage. It's just a decision that he's made. And the best thing that you can do is to continue to love your spouse, love your husband, and to just continue going to church yourself, because I can promise you, you doing so, loving him, being kind to him, just having faith in him and continuing to pray for him, he's going to notice all of those things. And then once he sees your example, maybe that's what he needs to motivate him to want to go to church again. Next question, what do you do when your significant other is introverted and not so social? So, welcome to my marriage, guys. So my husband is an introvert. Actually I would say that I myself am an introvert, but I would classify myself more as an extroverted introvert. Like at the end of the day, I just really want to come home and just like be by myself, watch my movies or read a book or just do something where I don't have to be at everybody else's beckoning call, or where I don't have to be like in like a really large crowd of people to recollect myself. So I would say that I'm an introvert in that sense, but also like I can be an extrovert if I need to. Like if there's nobody, if there's no life to the party, or if nobody is doing anything, I will be that person to step up to like play a game or initiate a game, or to make conversations with people if nobody at the table is talking. And so I would say that I am an extroverted introvert, where my husband, he is very much an introverted person. He likes to just do his own thing. He takes, a long time to kind of think and process things, but that's because he's really trying to be thoughtful in what he has to say, and he's very quiet. So sometimes it can be challenging for me when I'm trying to like understand things about him or trying to get his viewpoints or opinions. He's just very to himself. For example, if you guys are like at a party or something, and there's a lot of energy going on, there's a lot of people, it's really loud, and it's really just not in your spouse's like comfort zone, I would say, one of the first things that you should do is just to set some ground rules and understandings with each other. Talk to yourselves before you go in, just to say, hey, let me know if you need a break. We don't have to stay forever. We can just be in here for like an hour. We can just stay for an hour or so, and then we can go. Just seeing what their needs are. Because I feel the thing about introverts is that they don't always share how they feel or what's going on in their mind, because they're still thinking and processing it, and sometimes they're just naturally really quiet people. And then they're so easily overlooked in that way. People tend to just ignore introverts because they don't talk right away, or they don't have a lot of energy when they present themselves, and it's really doing discredit to introverts. So if your spouse is more introverted, I would just always make sure that you have communication with him or her to understand like what it is that they need, so they don't feel disrespected, especially by you, their spouse. What do you do when you don't get along with your in-laws? First, I guess it depends on if you live with your in-laws, or if your in-laws live with you, or if you and your spouse live on your own and your in-laws live somewhere else. I will say that if your in-laws do not live with you, it's a lot easier to manage that relationship. My husband and I, we have lived on our own, separate from our in-laws before, and then now my in-laws and all of us, we all live together. So we've gotten to experience both of those relationships. There is no magic button to have a great relationship with in-laws, right? It's a relationship, just like your relationship with your spouse. And in order for any relationship to go well, you need to be able to put some work into it. And you need to also, show up for that relationship if you want it to become better. I think that when you start to think that you should be behaving differently or you should be doing things differently in order to please your in-laws or to make them happy, I understand that you want to be, considerate, you want to be, thoughtful of them. But you also have to remember that you have to be thoughtful of yourself and of your spouse. Because now that you and your spouse are married, you guys are one unit. And you guys are your own family. In the Bible it says that the man will leave his mother and father and start a new life with his wife. And I really believe that to be true, which can be difficult sometimes for parents. And I know probably one day when my husband and I have kids, it's going to be hard and difficult for us too, because this is your kid, this is your flesh and blood. And so I think what's important is that you communicate with your in-laws the best that you can whenever you can, because in that way then you know that you did all that you could when it comes to communication. Your relationship with your in-laws is only as good as you want it to be. If you don't want it to be any better, then it's probably going to stay the same. If you want it to improve, then you also have to be willing to put in that work to make that relationship better. And I know that relationships are two-way streets, but someone's got to start. And if you're the one with this question, most likely it's going to have to start with you. And it's going to be tough, but if you want that relationship to get better, know that this is what you're going to have to do. Because when you get married, you don't just become a wife or husband. You also become a son or a daughter-in-law. And also the thing is, whenever you are having problems or issues with your in-laws, I really believe that the communication should be happening from parent to child as opposed to in-law, because you didn't grow up with your in-laws, you don't know how they are, but your spouse does. And so for me, if I have an issue with my in-laws or if something is going on and I'm just not feeling really comfortable about it, or I have some thoughts or some questions, or I just want to get some clarity on some things, I will share that with my husband, and then my husband is the one that relays it over to my in-laws. And that's purely out of respect, because I don't want to be coming from a place of disrespect to my in-laws by the way of how I say things. Because in my mind, I could be thinking I'm trying to be a good communicator with them, but in their mind, they could be thinking, she's trying to be really aggressive, or she's coming off too strong right now. So it's understanding that dynamic between in-laws and you and your in-laws, and trying to be respectful in that sense. And again, just know that if there's any issues or if anything should come up, it really should be parent to child, or child to parent, as opposed to in-law to in-law. So the next question is, how do you compromise after a disagreement? So I'm still having my own thoughts about this, and I'm trying to figure out how I want to approach this in my marriage, because when we say the word compromise, we always think that it feels like one person is the winner and one person is the loser, and that's not true in marriage. When you compromise, it always seems like someone has to give in order to meet the needs of the other spouse, and that's not necessarily true or fair in marriage. So when how to compromise after disagreements, I would more so approach it from a way of how can we find a level playing field where both you and your spouse can be happy and satisfied with the result, without feeling like you have to sacrifice something that really means a lot to you or that you really hold true to. So I'll give you just an example. So like my husband and I, sometimes he wants to go out to eat at Chipotle, and sometimes I want to go out to eat at Chick-fil-A. For me, I do not like cilantro, so I don't really eat a lot of Mexican food and even some Asian foods, because Mexican food and Asian food uses a lot of cilantro. So I don't really like to go to Chipotle because I can't really eat anything there because everything has cilantro. And then I would rather just go eat at Chick-fil-A because I love Chick-fil-A. And so I guess you can say my husband and I, we compromise a lot in this sense where, when we can't decide where we want to go, and if one person wants to go here, the other person wants to go there, what we end up doing is that we both just go and eat at those two places. So my husband will go get something to go from Chick-fil-A or from Chipotle, I'll go get something to go from Chick-fil-A, and then we'll just eat in our car together with our separate foods. I mean, we don't always have to be eating the exact same thing. And so in this way, we are, compromising that we don't have to be eating the same food. We can just be eating our own food together, and that's a lot more meaningful to us. And especially like if you are arguing and you feel like you need to come to like a compromise or some solid or some shared ground, I would encourage you to really just put yourself like in your spouse's shoes. So let's say you guys are arguing about like family or work or something like, really serious, not, what you're going to eat. But just say you're arguing about something really serious. And so what I would encourage you to do is really just put yourself in your spouse's shoes, to try to understand, where they're coming from. Because you and your spouse grew up really different. What you think is one way, your spouse can think is a completely different way. And so it's really important that when you are trying to find a win-win solution for your marriage, that you are able to listen to your spouse and put yourself in their shoes so that you can understand where they're coming from. Because the experiences that have shaped you aren't necessarily the same experiences that have shaped your spouse. So the next question is, did you ever deal with jealousy? How does someone get over it? Or what advice would you give? So yes, I was a very jealous girlfriend. And sometimes in marriage, I'm a very jealous wife. And I would justify it by saying I'm jealous because I want my husband all to myself. I don't want to share him with anybody or anything else. And as his wife, that's, my right. I shouldn't have to share him with any other person, especially another woman. But when we were dating, yes, I was very jealous about some of the girls that he used to talk to. Because I would find myself very often comparing myself to them and thinking about like, oh, what was it about them that my husband liked so much? And then I tried to change myself to be like that so that I could be more attractive to him. But in reality, I was just pretending to be somebody that I was not. And I was striving to be somebody that I was not. And there's a reason why my husband is no longer interested in any of those girls, or there's a reason why he didn't pursue a relationship with any of them. And I completely disregarded that fact and only solely focused on the things that my husband liked about them. But when you really think about it, there were greater things that he didn't like about them. That's why he didn't end up marrying them. And so jealousy usually stems from a lot of insecurities that we have about ourselves. We feel like we're not good enough. We feel like somebody out there is better than us. We feel like we can never be the person that our spouse wants. And you're just doing a discredit to yourself. You've already done half the work right there. I mean, you're married already. The other half of the work is making sure that you stay married every day. And jealousy can be one of those things that creep up on you and really can ruin your relationship. And, you don't want to do that to your spouse. And you don't want to do that to yourself, because you're going to realize that it was really your own thoughts and habits that caused your marriage to end up a certain way. If it's not addressed, jealousy can elevate to a lot of anger or a lot of violence too, and that can get really, really scary. If there are specific things that have happened in your marriage that have caused you to feel jealous because of like infidelity or something like that, I would really recommend that you speak to a counselor, a therapist, or a pastor, someone who can address some of those issues that have happened in the past that maybe have led to these feelings of jealousy. If your spouse is the one that's feeling really jealous of you, then what I would recommend you doing is just start trying to do things so that your spouse doesn't feel like they can't trust you. Maybe you have been doing things where your spouse feels like they can't trust you, and so you need to rebuild that trust with them again. If your spouse is feeling really jealous about you, or if you're feeling really jealous about your spouse, I would say just really have a conversation and talk about it. That's the healthiest thing that you can do. And don't talk about it when you're both angry or upset, or when you're both fighting about it. And then just let each other know, what's causing you to feel jealous. And, hopefully you can come up with solutions or answers and a better understanding of how you two can move forward in a healthy way that's going to help serve you in your marriage. What is the best way to explain to non-Christians, or Christians too, about submitting to your husband? Okay, so I think we get the misconception that submitting means slavery, which it does not in this context. It doesn't mean that you have to give in to every single thing that he says and does. If your husband is telling you to do something that you know to your core is wrong, don't do it. And if you don't do it, it doesn't mean that you're not submitting to your husband. And I think we have to get out of that mindset and mentality that, again, submission means slavery, because it does not. That's not how God intended it to be. Like, if you take down that word submission, like, what does it mean, right? Submission is basically like under the mission. And according to Ephesians 5, husbands are supposed to love their wives as Christ loved the church, right? And so the mission of what husbands are supposed to be doing in marriage is to love their wife, to be gentle, to be kind, to treat her with, reverence, and to really just love her and, lay down his life for her. Just like what Christ did. Christ laid down his life for the church. And that's exactly how husbands should be treating their wives. And when the Bible says that wives submit to your husband, like, that's the kind of mission that I want to support. I want to have a husband who I know is going to, if he has to at the end of the day, lay down his life for me, because that's how much he loves me and how much he wants to take care of me. And so we get this idea that submission means that one person is a slave and one person is the master, but that is not what it means at all to be a submissive wife. Okay, so we just got to throw that idea out of the book. And when talking to non-Christians about this, I think that that's a common misconception too with non-Christians, is that they believe, oh well, women should not be slaves, they should not be treated as objects. And I completely agree. Like, nobody should be treated as an object. Nobody should be treated as a slave, and in this context, especially wives by their husbands. So the best way that I would say to share with non-Christians, like, what submitting to your husband means, it doesn't mean slavery. It means being under the mission of. That's literally what submission is. It's like, men are supposed to be protectors. Men are the protectors of marriage. And if you are a wife who is not allowing your husband to protect your marriage and to protect you, then you're not letting him live up to the true responsibilities and the true potential that he has as a husband. God designed marriage to be sacred in that way, where men need to protect their women. And if we, disrespect our husbands by not submitting to them, that's one of the ways where we're taking away from our husbands something that, they could be learning from marriage. There's two different roles and responsibilities that men and women have in marriage, but they're supposed to work harmoniously together in order to have a strong foundation. And, it can't happen if the wife isn't willing to submit and the husband isn't willing to lead. Like, that's where you're going to come into a lot of problems and issues. So we just have to throw out the idea that submission does not mean slavery, whether we're sharing that to other fellow Christians or to non-Christians. So the last question that I'm going to answer is, my husband lives in another state. What can we do to keep marriage a priority? Wow, that is really tough. It's not a tough question to answer, but like, living in a different state as your spouse, like that can be really tough. I hope it's only temporary for you, because for that to be permanent is going to be really, really hard to do. But so my husband and I, we were actually in a long distance relationship before we got married. We were long distance dating for 5 years, and then we got married after 7 years. So I can kind of relate to what you're saying when, you are living in a different state as, your significant other. I mean, for me, it was boyfriend at the time, but for you, it's your husband or your spouse. I would say just do whatever you can to try to stay emotionally connected with each other. That can mean talking on the phone. It can be FaceTiming. It could be doing Skype or Zoom, or just trying to constantly be in connection with each other, because honestly texting can only go so far. You need that verbal confirmation, you need that physical confirmation. You know, if you can, try flying out to see each other, you know, as often as you can. I know it could probably be expensive, but hopefully this is only something that's temporary for you and in your marriage. I hope that one day, very, very soon, you guys will be able to come together and live together and be together forever. Because a long distance marriage, that's really tough. And you know, it's not too cheesy to like fall asleep talking on the phone with each other too. I mean, that just brings me back to like my dating days with my husband. You know, it was one of like the sweetest things that you know, he would do, is he would just stay on the phone with me until I fell asleep. And it really made me feel safe and secure knowing that he was there on the other line. And sometimes I would wake up and I would have like a really bad dream, and like he was right there. Granted that he was, you know, staying up a little bit later than me, but the fact is that he was there. And so showing up, continue to show up for your spouse even though you can't be there in person, is so important. So the best thing that you can do is show up for your spouse emotionally, and also just to continue to have talks with each other and to communicate with each other, because long distance can also be really hard on trust, right? Like, you don't know what your spouse is doing. They could be doing, hopefully they're not doing other things, and that they have you in their intentions. But you know, just don't do anything that would make your spouse distrust you or feel like they can't respect you. So just being honest with each other, communicating with each other, remembering to connect emotionally with each other. I mean, you guys can both watch a movie at the same time and just FaceTime each other, you know? There's a lot of different ways that you can go out to try to make sure you stay connected emotionally with your spouse. Okay guys, I don't want to make this video too long, so I'm just going to answer those questions for now. If you have any additional questions, you can leave them down below in the comment box, or you can send me a message on Instagram, and maybe I'll do another one of these Q&A about marriage and about life. I love answering your guys' questions, not because I feel like I have all the answers or that I have the right answers, but I just have my own perspective, and hopefully, you know, the things that I have shared with you about the answers to these questions have been helpful, and also have given you maybe a different perspective. So yeah, thank you for all your questions and whoever submitted them. If you have any other questions, again, feel free to just let me know, and I will try to answer them in the next Q&A session that I have. So thanks for watching this video, guys, and I'll see you later. Bye!